The Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress earned its nickname for its formidable defensive firepower. With up to 13 to 50 caliber machine guns placed around its fuselage, tail and nose, it seemed almost invincible in theory. American propaganda during World War II portrayed the B-17 as an indestructible machine that could take on waves of German fighters and still return home safely. However, the harsh reality of air combat over Europe was very different. Despite its armor and guns, thousands of B-17s were destroyed in fierce dogfights and heavy flak barrages. The name, Flying Fortress, gave crews a sense of pride, but it also created a dangerous illusion of safety. The truth was that no matter how well armed a bomber was, it was still a large, slow, moving target in a sky full of fast, aggressive enemy aircraft. The myth of invincibility would soon be shattered by the brutal lessons of aerial warfare. Over Germany, where survival depended as much on luck and tactics as on machine guns and armor plating. B-17s were designed to fly in tight formations, allowing their overlapping fields of fire to protect one another. In theory, this box formation created a defensive shield that made it difficult for German fighters to approach. In practice, however, maintaining these formations was incredibly hard. Turbulence, cloud cover, and evasive maneuvers often broke up the bomber's precise alignment, leaving individual aircraft exposed. Once separated, a lone B-17 became easy prey for Luftwaffe pilots who specialized in picking off stragglers. Furthermore, even when the formation held, German pilots learned to exploit weaknesses in its structure, attacking head on or from below, where the bombers had limited coverage. Coordinated assaults by dozens of Messerschmitts or Foch Wolfs could overwhelm even the tightest formations. The B-17's guns could only cover so many angles at once, and gunners were often distracted or blinded by smoke and sunlight. What looked like a fortress from afar was, in reality, a vulnerable web of overlapping defenses that could collapse quickly once attacked with precision and aggression. The Luftwaffe's defense network was one of the most sophisticated in the world. As Allied bombing campaigns intensified, Germany adapted rapidly. Radar stations detected incoming bomber streams early, allowing fighter groups to intercept them at ideal points along their routes. Coordinated ground control guided Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Foch Wolf FSO-190s into optimal attack positions. The Germans also developed new tactics. Head-on attacks that exploited the B-17's weaker nose defenses, and vertical climbs from below, where defensive fire was minimal. In addition to fighters, the bombers faced a deadly rain of flak from anti-aircraft guns stationed around key industrial targets. These batteries were accurate and devastating, tearing through wings and fuselages long before fighters even arrived. A single flak shell could destroy an entire bomber or cripple its engines, forcing the crew to bail out over enemy territory. Despite their defensive guns, the B-17 crews were fighting against a coordinated machine of radar, artillery, and expert pilots, a machine that grew stronger as the war went on. Although the B-17 carried many machine guns, this did not guarantee effective defense. The success of these guns depended entirely on human gunners, visibility, and coordination. Gunners had to spot, track, and hit fast, moving fighters that could close in at speeds over 300 miles per hour. In combat, visibility was often reduced by clouds, smoke, and sunlight glare, making it nearly impossible to maintain accurate fire. Moreover, ammunition was limited. Sustained firing could quickly exhaust the supply during long missions. Gunners also faced physical challenges. thin oxygen, freezing temperatures, and intense vibrations, all of which reduced accuracy. Even if a gunner scored hits, it often took multiple direct shots from a .50 caliber machine gun to bring down a well-armored enemy fighter. The B-17's defensive concept worked in theory, but in practice, it was less effective against concentrated, well-timed attacks by experienced Luftwaffe pilots. The Bristling guns became psychological reassurance rather than a true guarantee of survival. One of the main reasons B-17s suffered such heavy losses was the U.S. Army Air Force's insistence on daylight bombing. Unlike the British Royal Air Force, which switched to nighttime raids for safety, American commanders believed precision bombing could only be achieved during daylight. This meant flying straight into the teeth of German defences, with clear visibility for both attackers and defenders. During daylight, German fighters could easily spot and intercept bomber streams, while flak gunners could accurately target their altitude and direction. The results were catastrophic in the early years. Entire bomber groups were wiped out during raids over targets like Schweinfurt and Regensburg. While daylight bombing allowed greater accuracy, it came at an enormous human and material cost. Crews faced one of the most dangerous assignments in the war, with some missions recording losses of up to 25% in a single day. The B-17's guns could not compensate for the vulnerability that came from flying in broad daylight against a fully alert enemy. At the beginning of the strategic bombing campaign, B-17s were sent deep into Germany without adequate fighter escort. U.S. commanders believed that the bombers' defensive armament was sufficient for self-protection. This belief proved disastrously wrong. Without long-range escorts, the bombers were left exposed once they flew beyond the range of P-47 Thunderbolts and early P-38 Lightnings. German fighters could then attack with impunity. The introduction of the P-51 Mustang changed everything. It had the range to accompany bombers all the way to Berlin and back. Once the Mustangs began escorting formations, B-17 losses dropped dramatically. The Mustangs could chase away or destroy German fighters before they could reach the bombers, restoring some level of safety to the skies. However, before the arrival of these escorts in late 1943 and early 1944, thousands of B-17s and tens of thousands of airmen had already been lost. The belief that defensive guns alone could protect the bombers was proven fatally optimistic. Flying aboard a B-17 was one of the most dangerous jobs in World War II. The average bomber crewman faced extreme cold, oxygen deprivation, and constant fear of death. Flak explosions shredded metal and flesh alike, while German fighters attacked relentlessly from multiple directions. Many crews never completed the required 25 missions to rotate home. Survival rates were shockingly low, especially during 1943. Even those who made it back often suffered psychological trauma from witnessing the destruction of neighboring planes and the loss of close friends. Despite the aircraft's reputation for toughness, its crews were painfully aware of its vulnerabilities. Each mission brought a mix of courage, fatalism, and fear. The sight of burning bombers spiraling to Earth was a constant reminder that the Flying Fortress was still mortal. For many airmen returning home in a battered, bullet-riddled B-17 was not just luck, it was a small miracle. The B-17 was indeed rugged compared to other bombers, but it was not indestructible. Its aluminum frame, though sturdy, could not withstand direct hits from cannon shells or flak bursts. A single hit to the fuel tanks or oxygen system could turn the plane into a fireball. The engines, though powerful, were vulnerable to overheating and mechanical failure, especially during long missions over enemy territory. Damage to one or two engines could severely limit speed and altitude, making the bomber an easy target. The control cables and hydraulics were also exposed. A severed line could render the aircraft uncontrollable. Furthermore, the B-17's armor protection was selective. It covered key crew areas, but left large portions of the fuselage thinly shielded. When combined with high-altitude conditions and long flight durations, even minor mechanical failures could quickly turn deadly. The B-17 was tough, but in the brutal environment of air combat, toughness alone wasn't enough to guarantee survival. As the war progressed, German pilots adapted their tactics to counter the B-17's strengths. Early on, they attacked from the rear, but soon realized that the bomber's tail gunners could inflict heavy damage. They then shifted to head-on assaults, exploiting the limited forward firepower of the B-17. Later, they developed coordinated attack patterns, using rockets and heavy 20 mm or 30 mm cannons that could destroy a bomber with just a few hits. Specialized aircraft like the Messerschmitt Me-410 were equipped with upward-firing guns designed to strike from below, completely outside the defensive arcs of the bombers. The Luftwaffe's evolving tactics constantly tested the B-17's design limits. What began as manageable engagements soon became deadly coordinated attacks that overwhelmed even experienced gunners. The B-17's defensive design was static. It couldn't evolve mid-war as quickly as the tactics used against it. This imbalance ensured that the bomber's gunfire could rarely keep pace with the enemy's innovations. Military planners overestimated the effectiveness of massed defensive firepower. The assumption was that multiple bombers firing together could create an impenetrable wall of lead. However, the chaos of air combat made this ideal impossible. Gunners had difficulty distinguishing between friendly and enemy aircraft, and often fired ineffectively or hesitated to avoid hitting their own. Gun coordination required intense training and communication, which was nearly impossible amid the noise and confusion of battle. Statistical studies after the war revealed that hit rates from bomber gunners were astonishingly low, sometimes less than 1%. This meant that despite thousands of bullets fired, very few enemy fighters were actually shot down. The illusion of overwhelming firepower turned out to be just that, an illusion. The Luftwaffe's precision and aggression proved that the real advantage lay not in numbers of guns, but in superior tactics, speed, and coordination. The bristling defenses of the B-17 simply could not compensate for these realities. Despite the losses, the B-17 bombing campaign was strategically crucial. The raids forced Germany to divert vast resources to home defense. Fighters, flak guns, radar, and manpower that could have been used on the front lines. Each destroyed bomber was costly, but the overall campaign helped cripple German industry and morale over time. The heavy losses demonstrated the brutal arithmetic of strategic bombing. Overwhelming force, even at great cost, could wear down the enemy. The B-17's role was not just to survive, but to deliver bombs with enough consistency to break Germany's war-making capacity, while thousands of aircraft were lost. The campaign eventually succeeded in exhausting the Luftwaffe and paving the way for the Allied invasion of Europe. Thus, the B-17's sacrifice, though immense, played a vital part in securing ultimate victory. The aircraft's shortcomings in defense were overshadowed by its contribution to the broader strategy of relentless aerial pressure. In hindsight, the B-17 story is one of courage, innovation, and tragedy. It was a masterpiece of 1930s engineering that faced the full fury of 1940s warfare. Its many guns symbolized American determination and technological might, but also revealed the limits of that approach. Thousands of airmen paid with their lives to prove that no aircraft, however well armed, could win a war alone. The lessons learned from those losses shaped post-war bomber designs, favoring speed, altitude, and electronic countermeasures over raw firepower. Today, the surviving B-17s serve as flying memorials to the men who fought and died in them. Their battered airframes and bullet holes tell the true story: bravery in the face of overwhelming odds. The B-17 may not have been invincible, but it remains an enduring symbol of endurance, sacrifice, and the relentless pursuit of victory in one of history's most brutal air campaigns.